The ache in Lily's feet. The scent of stale coffee and industrial-strength cleaner was Lily's constant companion. It clung to her uniform, permeated her hair, and now, it seemed to have seeped into the very soles of her feet. Each step she took across the checkered linoleum floor of the diner sent a throb of pain echoing up her shins. The ache wasn't new, but tonight it felt like a relentless drumbeat, a counterpoint to the clatter of plates and the drone of diner chatter. "Another refill for table 7, hon," Brenda called from behind the counter, her voice a little too cheerful for the late hour. Lily nodded, her smile feeling brittle. Table 7 was Mr. Henderson, a regular who always nursed a single cup of coffee for 2 hours, leaving a meager tip. As she poured, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the chipped silver coffee pot, tired eyes, smudged mascara, a stray strand of hair escaping her bun. She looked every bit the overworked waitress she was. Later, clearing plates from a boisterous group of teenagers, a sharp pain lanced through her left arch. Lily flinched, nearly dropping a stack of greasy fries. She hobbled to the kitchen, leaning heavily against the counter. "My feet are killing me," she muttered to herself, peeling off her worn-out work shoe. A large, angry blister had formed just below her pinky toe. It pulsed red and angry. Just then, the bell above the entrance chimed, signaling a new customer. Lily sighed. She hoped it wasn't another table of teenagers. She slipped her shoe back on, wincing. When she emerged, a man was already seated at the corner booth, the one with the torn upholstery. He was impeccably dressed, a stark contrast to the diner's usual clientele. His dark suit was tailored, his tie a deep sapphire blue, and a silver watch gleamed on his wrist. His eyes, though, were what caught Lily's attention, a startling shade of green that seemed to take in everything at once. He looked vaguely familiar, a fleeting memory she couldn't quite grasp. He didn't look up from the menu as she approached. "What can I get for you?" Lily asked, her voice betraying a hint of her exhaustion. He finally raised his head, and a slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "You." "Lily, isn't it?" he said, his voice a low rumble. Lily's breath hitched. That voice. Those eyes. It was him. The man from the bookstore, the one who'd bought the rare first edition and then, unbelievably, offered her a job. The one she'd awkwardly turned down, consumed by her own self-doubt. Her cheeks flushed as a wave of mortification washed over her. He remembered her. And he was here. He seemed to sense her discomfort, his smile widening slightly. "Still working here, I see." It wasn't a judgment, but a simple observation. "Yes," she managed, her voice a little too squeaky. She felt the ache in her feet flare up again, a sudden, sharp reminder of her reality. She was still stuck, still dreaming of something more. "I'm here to offer you that job again, Lily," he said, his green eyes steady, unwavering. "And this time, I won't take no for an answer." Lily stared at him, the noise of the diner fading into a distant hum. The blister on her foot throbbed, a dull, insistent ache. But suddenly, it felt different. It felt like the last vestiges of a life she was finally, truly, ready to leave behind. Mr. Harrison's Tuesday table. The scent of roasted garlic and thyme usually calmed Alara, a familiar balm against the evening rush. Tonight, however, it only amplified the tremor in her hands as she carried the platter of pan-seared scallops towards Mr. Harrison's Tuesday table. He preferred the corner booth, a place of quiet observation, and tonight, his gaze felt particularly acute. "Excellent, Alara." Prompt as ever, Mr. Harrison said, his voice a low rumble. His eyes, the color of old amber, flickered to the empty seat opposite him. "The usual for my guest, please." Alara swallowed. The guest was always a mystery, a shadow at the periphery of Mr. Harrison's routine. Tonight, that shadow had a name. Of course, Mr. Harrison. And for Mr. Volkov. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Mr. Harrison's lips. "Indeed. He prefers the filet, medium rare." And a glass of the '09 Cabernet Sauvignon. As she relayed the order to Chef Antoine, Elara's mind raced. Volkov. The name had circulated in hushed whispers among the staff for weeks, tied to vague rumors of property acquisitions and aggressive business dealings. The man who had, indirectly, caused her recent troubles. Her hands tightened around the wine bottle as she poured Mr. Harrison's initial glass. When Volkov finally arrived, he moved with a predator's quiet grace, a stark contrast to Mr. Harrison's more deliberate movements. He was a man carved from sharp angles, with eyes that missed nothing. He offered Elara a curt nod as he slid into the booth, his gaze sweeping over the restaurant before settling on Mr. Harrison. "You're late," Mr. Harrison stated, not as an accusation, but a simple fact. Volkov merely inclined his head. Unforeseen complications. His voice was a gravelly murmur that sent a shiver down Elara's spine as she served his wine. The conversation between the two men was a tightly coiled spring, each word a strategic move. They spoke of markets, of investments, of leveraging assets. Elara, discreetly refilling water glasses, caught snippets that painted a chilling picture of Volkov's ruthlessness. He mentioned a recent disposal of a competitor's interest, a phrase that felt too casual for the implied outcome. Then, Mr. Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping. "And the matter of the waitress, Elara?" Elara froze, the water pitcher tilting precariously. Volkov's eyes, suddenly sharp, landed on her. She felt an uncomfortable heat rise in her cheeks. "Ah, yes," Volkov said, a dry amusement in his tone. "An unfortunate incident. Easily rectified, I assure you." He turned his gaze back to Mr. Harrison. "A simple oversight. Her family's lease will be renewed, of course. With a substantial incentive for their troubles." Elara's breath hitched. A substantial incentive? He was talking about her family's apartment, the one she'd been desperately trying to save. Mr. Harrison simply watched Volkov, a sphinx-like expression on his face. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent battle of wills played out over a Tuesday dinner. Elara, suddenly an unwilling participant, felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. What was Mr. Harrison truly playing at? And what did Volkov's rectification truly mean for her? The unlucky mistake. The sharp crack of porcelain on linoleum, a sound usually synonymous with impending trouble for Elara, was tonight merely the echo of her own careless hand, sending a forgotten sugar packet holder spinning across the table. Her shift had dissolved into a haze of half-finished coffees and the lingering aroma of stale fries. Mrs. Gable, the diner's proprietor, had been in one of her efficiency moods, which invariably meant Elara shouldering a double workload. "You all right, sweetie?" Mrs. Gable's voice, surprisingly soft, pierced Elara's tired thoughts as she wiped down the counter, a faint sheen of perspiration on her brow. "Just weary, Mrs. Gable," Elara murmured, bending to retrieve the skittered holder, her back a familiar throb. "Well, you've earned your rest. Head on out. I'll see to the lockup." Mrs. Gable motioned towards the exit with a well-worn dishcloth. "And try for some actual sleep tonight. You look positively spectral." A weak smile touched Elara's lips, grateful for the unexpected reprieve. The night air, a cool, damp caress against her skin, was a jolt after the diner's greasy warmth. She drew her threadbare cardigan tighter, its worn wool offering scant protection from the chill. Her apartment, a mere few blocks away, promised a small sanctuary from the daily grind. As she walked, streetlights carved long, shifting shadows that danced ahead, transforming the familiar path into something subtly menacing. She arrived at her building, a faded brick edifice that had clearly seen more vibrant decades. The lobby was sparsely lit, the ancient elevator a whirring, groaning beast she typically eschewed. But tonight, her legs rebelled against the 4 flights of stairs. She pressed the call button, the dim indicator light above it flickered uncertainly. The elevator doors eventually groaned open, revealing not an empty cage, but a man. He was tall, with sharply defined features and eyes that seemed to drink in the meager light. His dark, impeccably tailored suit struck an absurdly jarring note against the building's dingy confines. An instinctive wave of unease rippled through Elara. He seemed familiar, yet she couldn't place him. A customer, perhaps? She served countless faces. Going up, he asked, his voice a low, resonant rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't an offer of politeness, but a statement edged with something unnerving. Elara hesitated, then stepped inside. The doors slid shut with a mournful sigh, plunging them into a claustrophobic quiet broken only by the elevator's slow ascent. The air immediately thickened, charged with an unspoken tension. Her purse, clutched in her hand, felt heavy, yet offered no solace. She risked a glance. He was watching her, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. His gaze felt like a tangible touch, cold and penetrating. It was then, as the elevator juddered to a stop on the second floor, that a terrifying understanding dawned. This was no random diner patron. This was the man from table 7, the one whose order she'd bungled just hours before. The one who had inexplicably tipped her $1,000. The one whose eyes had held a dangerous glint, a detail she'd dismissed as mere weariness. The doors hissed open. Her floor. She scrambled out, heart thudding against her ribs, the dread now a cold, hard knot in her stomach. As her fingers fumbled for her keys, she heard him step out behind her. "We need to talk, Elara," he said, his voice closer than she'd anticipated. The words were a silken threat, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her unlucky mistake had just found its way home. A diner's silence. The bell above the door of Pop's diner jingled a mournful tune, announcing the arrival of another lost soul. Or, in this case, the departure. Elara watched as the tall, gaunt man who'd occupied booth 7 for the past 2 hours finally pushed himself up. He left a 20 on the table, far too much for the lukewarm coffee and single slice of pie he'd consumed. She'd learned to recognize the look in his eyes, the hollow gaze that spoke of a deep-seated weariness. It was the same look she often caught in her own reflection after a double shift. With a practiced ease, Elara cleared the table, the clatter of ceramic against laminate echoing in the near-empty diner. The only other customer was an elderly woman meticulously buttering a scone, seemingly oblivious to the unspoken drama that permeated the air. Elara moved to the counter, wiping it down with a damp cloth, her movements efficient and practiced. She glanced at the clock on the wall, its hands creeping towards midnight. Another hour, then she could finally go home, collapse onto her threadbare couch, and pretend the world outside didn't exist. Just as she was about to refill the coffee urn, the bell chimed again. A man stood framed in the doorway, his silhouette imposing against the faint glow of the streetlights. He was well dressed, in a way that screamed, "Doesn't belong here." His eyes, when they met hers, were an unsettling shade of hazel, sharp and assessing. He slid into booth 4, the one directly opposite the counter, and laid a sleek leather briefcase on the seat beside him. "Just coffee, black," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't look at the menu, didn't even glance around the worn interior. It was as if he already knew exactly what he wanted, and nothing else mattered. Elara poured his coffee, the steam curling around her fingers. As she placed it in front of him, he pulled a stack of crisp bills from his wallet, hundreds, by the look of them, and fanned them out on the table. He selected one, placing it beneath the saucer. "Keep the change," he murmured, his gaze still fixed on her. It wasn't a leer, not exactly. It was something colder, more calculating. A shiver traced its way down Elara's spine. She hadn't even taken his order for food. "Sir, I haven't even given you your bill yet." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "I think you have," he said, a faint, unsettling smile playing on his lips. The elderly woman at the booth, finally finished with her scone, chose that moment to push back her chair. The jingle of the door as she left seemed to amplify the silence that followed. Elara was alone with the man, the stack of money, and the growing sense of unease that settled in the pit of her stomach. The diner, usually a refuge, suddenly felt like a cage. The quiet observer. The scent of stale coffee and something vaguely antiseptic clung to Ilara's apron as she navigated the breakfast rush. Her head felt heavy, a dull throb behind her eyes from the restless night. Every clang of a dish, every shouted order, seemed to amplify the gnawing worry that had settled deep in her gut. She poured another cup for Mrs. Henderson, a regular whose complaints about the weather were as predictable as the sunrise. Another dreary day, Ilara, Mrs. Henderson sighed, stirring 3 sugars into her coffee. Still, at least it's quiet in here today. Not like that ruckus yesterday. Ilara just offered a tired smile, her gaze drifting toward the corner booth. He was there again, the man from yesterday. The man who had, with a quiet intensity that belied his unassuming appearance, diffused the volatile situation with Mr. Silas. He sat alone, a half-empty mug of black coffee before him, a worn leather-bound journal open on the table. He wasn't sketching or writing, just observing. His eyes, a startling shade of hazel, swept over the diner with a calm, almost analytical detachment. He noticed everything, the frayed hem of the curtain, the hurried movements of the cook, the lingering tension in Ilara's shoulders. She tried to busy herself with wiping down the counter, but she felt the weight of his gaze. It wasn't intrusive or predatory, merely present. Like a shadow, or the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights. A shiver traced its way down her spine, not of fear, but of an unsettling awareness. This wasn't a casual diner patron. The way he held himself, the subtle way he positioned his body, always facing the entrance, spoke of a practiced vigilance. A sudden, sharp cry erupted from the kitchen, a dropped tray, followed by a curse. Ilara flinched, but the man in the corner didn't so much as twitch. His gaze remained steady, absorbing the momentary chaos, processing it. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then, without looking directly at her, pushed the journal slightly forward, revealing a small, folded piece of paper tucked beneath the corner. Her heart hammered a little faster. She hesitated, her hand hovering over a sugar dispenser. What was this? A tip? A complaint? Or something else entirely? She glanced around. No one was paying them any mind. With a quick, almost imperceptible movement, she snatched the paper as she passed, tucking it into her apron pocket. Her fingers brushed against the cool, crisp surface. The paper felt thick, expensive. Back behind the counter, pretending to refill napkins, she unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, precise. Don't trust the usual. Pay attention to the quiet ones. No signature. Just those cryptic words. Ilara's breath hitched. The usual? Who was the usual? And the quiet ones? Like him? A cold dread seeped into her bones. The incident yesterday, Mr. Silas's strange fury, the man's intervention, it all suddenly coalesced into something far more sinister than a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't just about her. A calm voice in the storm. The wind howled a furious symphony against the diner's windows, rattling the glass in its frames. Rain, driven by the gale, hammered against the pane in a relentless staccato. Inside, a different kind of storm brewed. The air crackled with a volatile energy as Mr. Henderson, his face a mottled red, leaned across the counter, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You think this is a joke, girl? My wife's funeral is tomorrow. Tomorrow. He slapped a crumpled receipt onto the worn formica, the sound swallowed by the storm's roar. And you've managed to ruin the one thing she truly loved. Ilara stood her ground, her gaze steady, though her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was used to difficult customers, but this was different. The man's grief was a tangible thing, a heavy cloak draped around him, distorting his anger into something almost primal. Mr. Henderson, I understand you're upset, she began, her voice a calm counterpoint to the tempest outside and within. But I assure you, I followed the order exactly as it was written. She gestured to the pristine notepad, its lines filled with her neat script, chocolate raspberry tort. Extra glaze. The very tort she remembered carefully boxing for him. His eyes, bloodshot and brimming with unshed tears, narrowed. No, you didn't. This abomination has walnuts. Walnuts. My Evelyn was severely allergic. He pushed a small, half-eaten slice of cake towards her, the offending nuts clearly visible. Elara's stomach dropped. Walnuts. Her mind raced, sifting through the day's orders. She had meticulously double-checked every ingredient for Evelyn Henderson's usual order. This couldn't be right. Just then, a figure emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a flour-dusted apron. It was Leo, the night baker. He took in the scene, Mr. Henderson's fury, Elara's pale face, the rejected cake. Leo, usually reserved, stepped forward. Mr. Henderson, if you'd allow me to check the kitchen logs, perhaps there was a mix-up with the labels. His voice, though gentle, carried an unexpected authority. Mr. Henderson, caught off guard by the unexpected intervention, faltered. Logs? What good are logs now? Evelyn she's gone. This was her last treat. His voice cracked, the anger momentarily dissolving into raw sorrow. Elara felt a pang of profound empathy. Leo, however, didn't waver. He turned to Elara. Elara, can you confirm the time of the order? And the specific label you used? His tone was calm, clear, cutting through the emotional haze. Elara, grateful for the anchor, recited the details, her mind replaying the moment she'd carefully placed the order sticker on the box. As she spoke, a flicker of something passed through Leo's eyes, a dawning comprehension. He disappeared back into the kitchen, returning moments later with a small, printed label. He held it up. This was attached to a Black Forest cake, Mr. Henderson. Delivered to table 5, not for takeout. It seems there was a confusion with the boxes during a busy rush. He turned the label, revealing the tiny handwritten W in the corner, Leo's personal mark for walnut-containing desserts. A collective breath seemed to be held in the diner. Mr. Henderson stared at the label, then at the cake, then back at Leo. The storm outside still raged, but inside, a fragile quiet descended. A shared dream. The scent of stale coffee and desperation clung to Lena's apron as she cleared table 7. Another long night, another stack of bills that wouldn't pay themselves. She rubbed at a phantom ache in her lower back, her gaze drifting to the lone figure hunched over a laptop in the corner booth, Elias Vance. He'd been coming in for weeks, always the same order, black coffee, no sugar, and hours of intense concentration. Tonight, however, felt different. A palpable hum of excitement seemed to emanate from him, a stark contrast to his usual quiet focus. Just as she was about to retreat to the kitchen, a sharp, almost triumphant gasp escaped his lips. He looked up, his eyes, usually shadowed, alight with an intensity that surprised her. Lena, he said, his voice a low rumble, I think. I've got it. Curiosity, a rare commodity in her weary life, nudged her forward. Got what, Mr. Vance? She asked, leaning against the edge of his booth. He spun the laptop to face her. The screen displayed a complex diagram, a swirling vortex of lines and equations that meant nothing to her, yet somehow felt significant. The algorithm. For the predictive model. It's finally stable. He paused, then looked directly into her eyes. Remember that idea I mentioned? About helping small businesses? This is the core of it. Lena remembered. A vague, hopeful dream he'd once shared during a late-night lull, a system that could predict customer trends, optimize inventory, and give struggling places like hers a fighting chance. She'd dismissed it then as another unattainable fantasy, but now, seeing the genuine fervor in his expression, a flicker of something akin to belief ignited within her. What does it do, exactly? She asked, her voice softer than she intended. Elias leaned in, his enthusiasm infectious. It learns. It analyzes everything from local events to weather patterns, social media buzz to supplier delays. It can tell a restaurant owner what to stock, when to staff up, even what specials will be most popular. It's a lifeline. He gestured to the screen. I've simulated it with a few real-world examples. The results are astounding. A sudden, audacious thought bloomed in Lena's mind. Could it help the diner? The words were out before she could second-guess herself, the desperation in her voice betraying the carefully constructed wall she usually maintained. Elias's gaze softened. He studied her for a moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. That, Lena, he said, his voice ringing with conviction, is precisely what I had in mind. The weight of months of endless shifts, the looming threat of closure, felt momentarily lighter. A shared dream, blooming in the most unlikely of places. The artist's invitation. The scent of turpentine and old canvas clung to the air, a familiar comfort to Alara as she navigated the narrow hallway of Professor Albright's studio. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight piercing the grimy window, illuminating stacks of forgotten sculptures and half-finished paintings. She clutched the heavy envelope in her hand, its embossed crest a stark contrast to her own worn apron, still carrying the faint aroma of burnt toast and yesterday's coffee. Albright, a man whose silver hair seemed to perpetually defy gravity, looked up from a charcoal sketch, his spectacles perched precariously on his nose. Alara, my dear. Punctual as ever. Come in, come in. He gestured with a charcoal-stained hand towards a rickety chair piled with art books. Professor, she began, feeling a blush creep up her neck, I got your invitation. She extended the envelope. He chuckled, taking it from her. Ah, yes. The annual alumni exhibition. A rather stuffy affair, I grant you, but excellent for networking. And, he paused, his gaze sharp, I believe you possess a raw talent that deserves to be seen. Alara swallowed. But I haven't painted seriously in years, not since I started at the diner. The words tasted bitter. The diner, the endless shifts, the suffocating routine, it had all but extinguished the spark she once had for art. Albright leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. Nonsense. True talent doesn't simply vanish, Alara. It merely waits for the right moment to re-emerge. I've seen your sketches in the margins of your old notebooks, the ones you left behind. Your eye for detail, your ability to capture the soul of a subject, it's still there. He tapped the invitation. This isn't merely an invitation, it's an opportunity. A chance to remind yourself of who you are, beyond the clatter of plates and the demands of impatient customers. The idea, once so distant, now felt tantalizingly close. The thought of holding a brush again, of mixing colors, of feeling the canvas beneath her fingertips, it was a forgotten melody beginning to play. Yet, a shadow of doubt remained. But Professor, I don't have any new work. And the entry fee, she trailed off, the unspoken financial strain hanging in the air. Albright smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. The entry fee is waived for my selected protégés. As for new work, I have a proposition. There's a new client, a rather eccentric collector, looking for a portrait. Something unique. He specifically asked for a fresh perspective, someone untainted by the established art scene. He leaned back, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. A waitress, perhaps, with an intriguing story behind her eyes. Alara's breath hitched. A commission? The very idea was audacious, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. The wrong man. The unbelievable gesture. It all flashed through her mind. Could this be the turning point she hadn't dared to dream of? A wonderful new beginning. The morning air, crisp and redolent with rain-washed earth and brewing coffee, felt like a clean slate. Alara, a lightness in her spirit she hadn't known in years, efficiently tied her apron. Today marked more than just another shift at the daily grind, it was the inaugural day of her new life. Above the diner's gentle hum, a discreet sign proclaimed, under new management, her management. She observed Mrs. Henderson, a fixture for decades, taking a sip of her customary black coffee. "Morning, Elara," Mrs. Henderson greeted, a twinkle in her eye. "Place has a certain vivacity now." "Just a touch of revitalization," Elara replied, a genuine smile illuminating her face. For 3 consecutive nights following her surprisingly smooth purchase from Mr. Harrison, she had poured her energy into repainting, deep cleaning, and reconfiguring the space. The former dingy yellow yielded to a calming sage green, and the motley collection of chairs was replaced by robust, comfortable wooden ones. It now exuded the warmth of a home, not merely a workplace. Her gaze drifted to the now empty corner booth, once Nathaniel's. Nathaniel, the man whose unexpected kindness and staggering generosity had orchestrated all of this. A shiver, a blend of warmth and trepidation, still traced her spine at the memory of his quiet strength and the warmth in his eyes. He departed for his expedition a week prior, his promise to return both a comfort and a terrifyingly delicate tether. The door chime announced a new arrival. A tall man, impeccably dressed, surveyed the room with an almost clinical detachment. An unsettling intensity in his gaze made Elara's smile waver. He was no regular, certainly not Nathaniel. "Table for 1, he stated, his voice a low gravel. Elara guided him to a small window-side table. As she extended the menu, a flash of silver on his wrist caught her eye, a distinctive signet ring, its crest vaguely familiar yet unplaceable. "Our coffee is quite renowned," she offered, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. "I'm not here for the coffee, Ms. Vance," he countered, his eyes narrowing. "I'm here for you." A knot tightened in Elara's stomach. I don't understand." "My name is Arthur Thorne," he continued, leaning slightly forward. "I represent the Thorne Group. We have a vested interest in this establishment, particularly given its recent change of proprietorship." His gaze swept over the fresh paint and new furnishings. "A rather swift acquisition, wouldn't you agree? Especially for a humble waitress." Elara's carefully constructed composure began to splinter. "Mr. Harrison was prepared to sell. I was prepared to buy." "Indeed. And how did a waitress, no offense intended, of course, manage to secure such a significant sum in such an abbreviated time frame?" His tone, laced with an insinuation that chilled her blood, revealed his intent. He was probing, digging. He knew about Nathaniel, she was certain. The fragile promise of her new beginning suddenly felt besieged. "That's personal," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Thorne chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Everything becomes personal when a thorn is involved. We suspect there may be irregularities in the transfer of ownership. And we fully intend to uncover them." He rose, dropping a business card onto the table. "Enjoy your new beginning, Ms. Vance. It may prove far briefer than you anticipate." The bell chimed again as he exited, leaving a palpable chill that infiltrated the newly revitalized space. Elara stared at the polished wood, the inviting green walls. The dream, it seemed, was already beginning to fracture.